So, have you ever wondered what happens when you run your code in JavaScript? Well, today we'll be looking at execution context, and execution context is that magic box that runs our code and stores our variables and functions and all that good stuff. This is what your execution context looks like. I've said it is like a magic box that does everything for us in JavaScript. So, this is the box. And the box comes in two parts. We have the memory. Sorry, I'm using my mouse, so not too good with writing. Memory and the code. So this is your code here. Memory and the code. Now, this memory stores. It's also known as your variable environment. It stores your variable and your function. So the memory stores your variables and your functions, and it stores them in key value pairs. So that's when we hear key value pairs, we're thinking of objects. And your code here at this block, it runs the code and it runs them synchronously. So this is also known as your thread of execution. So it will run all the code here till the very last code. So this is basically what your execution context looks like. So when we have a code to execute, this is what goes on in the execution context in JavaScript. So like we've said, execution context should be seen as a box that has two sides, the memory side and the code block. So let me quickly draw this. The memory and the code. So we're going to drop our variables and functions in this memory block. So the first variable we have here is n. So it will create n. Remember, it's like a key value pair, but it's not going to assign this to. It will just assign like a spatial memory. So that's just like, it's going to just give it some space, and it will give it a placeholder of undefined. Let me just leave it like that. So that's all for n. It will go to the next line, and we can see that this is a function. Now for functions, it just takes up the whole function. So this whole function, it will store it here, everything. So the whole function now lives in this memory. It goes on to the next variable, which is sum2. Just do s2. Just like the end variable, it gives it undefined and gives it a spatial memory. So this undefined is a placeholder, and it does this for s3 too. S3, and it gives it undefined. Let me just use a u. So this is the first phase of the execution context. The execution context comes in two phases. The memory creation phase, which is what we have seen here, is just creating memory in the context block. And when it comes to functions, it just takes the whole function and stores it. So the next phase will be the code execution phase, where it will run this code line by line and start giving the memory some value. That's these values will now replace all this undefined. So now for the code execution phase, JavaScript is going to run this code line by line. So for the first one, JavaScript comes here and sees there's a variable n with a value of 2. It checks its global context, which is this whole box, and sees that there's a variable of n with undefined. It now replaces this undefined. It replaces the undefined with 2. Replaces it with 2. And then it moves the control to the next line. Next line, it says that there's a function, sum, and as we've said previously, for functions, everything is stored, so there's nothing to do here. Now, to the next line, we have sum2, and sum n. This function is being invoked, or a function is being called or executed. That's what we mean when we say invoked. So when that happens, what do? JavaScript now creates another execution context box inside this code. So this is what happens. Let me clean all this. We have another box that is created here. The same thing, memory and code, and it's also going to be in two phases. So the first one is the memory creation, and the second phase will be the code execution. So we'll come here for this sum now. So this is the function that is being run, and this is where we'll find the whole code block here. So for sum, we can see that this argument here, because this is an argument and this is a parameter, this argument is going to fit into this parameter here. So the argument is n. We're going to form a variable n, just like we did in this one, and at first it's going to be undefined. So it's going to be undefined. It now moves to the second variable that we can see here, which is answer or ans. So the next variable, ans or answer, let me just use a. So this a stands for ans. Like we've said, variables always go with undefined. Now we are going to, that's all for the memory creation. So for the code now, for the code to run, we've seen that we need n is being passed here as an argument. So JavaScript now leaves this local memory, that's this red box, and moves to the global memory. Now we can see that in the global memory we have n variable which already has a 2. JavaScript comes back and cleans this our undefined and writes 2 here. So it writes 2 here. Let me put everything back. It writes 2 here. So this block now has been executed. Next, so as 2 is written, 2 is now passed here. So here right now, this num here, 2 is passed as into the parameter. It comes here now, because for JavaScript we run the code from right to left. So as 2 is passed, num is now 2. Num is now 2. 2 plus 2, the answer is 4. So this ans that we have here, we cancel it, and we're going to write 4 here. This one was 2. So this line has been executed. Now we're hitting the return ans. Now when we see return means you're going to take whatever the variable is back to where the code was called, not where the code was executed. It's where it was called. So consider it was called in this line. That's where the code was called. So this sum2 is here. This is where it is in our global execution. So this answer or ans4, we're going to clean this undefined here, and we're going to write 4. Now for return statements, once it's executed, what happens is that this your local execution code finishes. It ends. So it cancels it. Now your sum2, when you console log sum2, you're going to get the answer 4, not undefined. So that's how it's run. Same thing for S3. For S3 now, when it hits this block, when it hits the S3, same thing, a local execution context block is going to form, or box is going to form, sorry. And we have the memory and we have the code, memory and code, and we are going to assign the variables. So we'll come here, we can see that we're calling this sum10 now. So when we come here, num, because we're passing in 10. So num, that's this num here, is going to be undefined for our first memory creation. So this is undefined. This has been executed. So let me clean this up because okay. So we're working on this line. So sum 10. Now we've said that this 10 is the argument, and this sum is being invoked. So this is what we are working on, this sum, this part of the code. So sum, we've called sum, and that's why we've created this local execution context. That's this box. We have the memory, we have the code. Num is the first variable we're seeing here. Num for now is going to be undefined. Next we have answer, ans. Let me just write an A, is going to be undefined. So the memory creation phase is over because these two variables are the only variables inside this function. Now we're going to go to the code execution phase. So it goes back now and says, okay, there's this 10. This 10 is going to be placed inside this num here. So at this point, it's going to clean this num we have here, and we're going to get 10. So unlike the other one where 10, where this 2 was in the global variable here, so it had to go out of its local code execution to the global one, but this one, the 10 here, is being passed. So that's why it is not going anywhere. It is just placing it there in the memory. Then it comes to the next line. Where's the next line? Num. So it adds 10. Here will be 10. Here will be 10. 10 plus 10, 20. It gives 20 to this your ans. So here is going to be 20. This is going to be 20. Now it goes to the next line. It hits the return ans. Now it's going to return it to where this code was called, and it was called in this line, sum 3 whatever, sum 10. So it goes out of this is local box and it comes here. This is where it was called sum 3. Right now, what are we saying? We're saying undefined. It cleans it and passes 10. Okay, no, 20, because 10 plus 10, 20. So it passes 20 as the answer now. That has returned 20 to this place, the global code execution. And when we know that when we hit a return statement, that spells the end of that code block. So I will just clean everything here. And when we console log this, code now, when it runs, we'll see n for this one, s2 will be 4 and s3 will be 20. So this is what is happening behind the scenes when you run a code. And when you have this basic knowledge, when you see things like undefined, when you run your code, you have an idea of why your code is undefined and what is happening behind the scenes. So we would continue on this line to see things like hoisting and closures and undefined and null and all as we go on.